Welcome to the PharmaSource Podcast. Today's episode is an interview with Malik Akhtar, Vice President at Bayer's Consumer Health Division, where he oversees a network of 5,000 suppliers, including direct materials, APIs, and 180 contract manufacturers. In this interview, we talk about his career experience and shares his lessons in how to be effective in different procurement roles from his time at GSK and now at Bayer, and the 3C strategy he's implementing of managing cost inflation, cash flow, and CO2 De-carbonisation of the supply chain. Okay, Malik, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
You're currently Vice President at Bayer, responsible for procurement, consumer health, product supply. Could you tell us a bit more about that, please? What are you responsible for in that role?
Yeah, sure. So in my current role, I'm basically supporting our consumer health division and our direct materials organization. So everything that's involved in the manufacturing and the distribution of our products. So within that, we manage a number of contract manufacturer relationships where they're producing our finished goods, but also raw materials, active ingredients, and packaging components, as well as the logistics support. So be that air, ocean, road, freight, and warehousing as well.
A lot there then. I mean, roughly how many CDMOs, how many suppliers, what does that network of suppliers look like for you?
So the total number of suppliers that we have is probably in the order of around 5,000. So I think you could say more than we need. But obviously within that, we actively manage, on a segmentation basis, key suppliers, of which I'd say there's probably around about 200 that we're involved in. CMO specifically, we have around about 180 at the moment.
That's a very significant network of contract manufacturers around you then.
Yeah, so we have quite a large proportion of our manufacturing is external to Bayer. So we have obviously our own manufacturing network, but also a large external network that we're working with as well.
Very interesting. If we could go back into the midst of time. So before getting into all of this commercial stuff, your original degree was in chemical engineering, and that's where you joined GSK in a chemical engineering role. Interested to find out a bit more about that, and also what that looks like from someone with a science background, then over time transitioning into a commercial function. So how did that work for you?
I think in many ways I've ended up very close to where I started. So I came down to London many years ago and got the role at what was the Wellcome Foundation at the time. So a couple of iterations before it even became GSK, and was working in one of the API manufacturing facilities they had at the time in Dartford in the southeast of England. And had a great time working on kind of process design, plant design, then kind of installation qualification, and then ultimately moved into an operations role. So working on actually running the plant more technically and involved in the design, and had a great time. I was the very beginning of my career involved directly on the shop floor. Really rolling my sleeves up and getting my hands dirty, and if you like. And how I moved from that into my first commercial role, so my very first steps into procurement, was effectively the products that I was responsible for producing were coming to the end of their patent life. So as you'll know, within a standard pharma life cycle, you will make during the innovation and launch years, but then as it becomes mature and post-mature and off patent, you need to find more cost-effective ways to produce the drug, because you will get pressure on the selling price. So this came around on the antiviral portfolio I was looking at. So I was given the opportunity to join procurement and to see if I could find someone anywhere else in the world that could make it at a more competitive price. I obviously knew at that point exactly how to make it. I was responsible for writing the instructions and the batch record sheets in the plant itself. But what I obviously didn't know was anything about the commercial skills. Luckily, I had a very good teacher at the time who helped me to understand, how do you build relationships with these supplier partners? How do you better understand what it is that they want, and come to a fair price and a fair commercial agreement. So that was kind of my first step 23 years ago now, almost 24 years into procurement. And something stuck, I guess, in terms of what I saw and learned from the commercial side.
Is that a transition which you'd recommend to others? I mean, when you're thinking about your own team now, are those types of skills, someone with a background in chemistry, or is it easier to find someone who's already got those commercial skills?
The most important thing for me, and when we're going through the hiring process, is it doesn't matter. And actually, one of the things that we really value is the diversity that different people, different backgrounds and skills can bring to the team. I mean, yes, we have a number of subject matter experts that have come and have kind of developed the commercial skills. We have people who've joined from the commercial organization, and they've had to learn some more of the content and the details of what it is that they're buying and those relationships that they're negotiating. But, not many people actually set out for a career in procurement. I didn't. I don't think I really knew what procurement was at the point I was deciding which degree course to embark on. So I think for me, yes, it really, really helps if you deeply understand what it is you're buying, the category that you're responsible for. But equally, it's just as effective if you know where you can find that information, whether you're going to teach yourself and upskill yourself, or whether you're going to build a really supportive network of experts, be that quality, technical, regulatory, more so on the direct side where I'm now working. For me, that one of the areas which is really a differentiator is much more based on the personality of people, and actually how you approach building relationships, how you influence others, be that internal stakeholders, external suppliers, to create those strong partnerships and ultimately to get people what you want them to do at its very basic level. That's the differentiator for me in terms of between good and great procurement people.
When you did that first change and you're looking to going from an in-house model to an outsourcing model, did you have in mind already the kind of cost reduction you need? More generally, what kind of scale are we looking at for that?
So I'm not sure I remember whether we had a margin target at that point in time. It is a very long time ago, but I think that we were, if I remember rightly, we were able to reduce the cost of the active ingredients by about 70%.
Okay.
So it's significant, and obviously, knowing when we're going from patent protection to competing in a generics market, that wouldn't be dissimilar to other pricing changes that we see.
Yeah, hence the network of outsourcing partners.
Yeah.
The next step for you then was going into completely different categories. So moving away from APIs and moving into marketing. Interested to know about that transition for you, and what sort of steps did you take, or would you recommend others take when they're going into a completely new category?
So there was a brief step in between, which was actually when we were setting up the e-sourcing program at GSK. And just to be very honest, I'd just successfully run the first reverse auction for an API when I was in that procurement team at GSK. And one of the guys I've been working with that I had a lot of respect for, and was setting up the program, and asked me if I wanted to join. I said, yeah, why not? This is new and something which will be a new challenge. And it was when I was working in the e-sourcing program, convincing people not only internally but externally about the power of reverse auctions and how we could achieve so much more, that I was exposed to many other areas of procurement. So, I did a little bit of work in HR services, IT, R&D, but then also marketing. And, I think having a relatively logical chemical engineer's brain and looking at marketing as a category and area, thinking seems a little bit dysfunctional, dare I say, or disorganized. So thought that there was something there that I could really get stuck into and try and apply some of those commercial skills, those relationship building skills that I mentioned, to an entirely different and creative category. So, I mean, you asked about the what people should think about when transitioning from one category to the other. One of the things I feel very strongly about is you don't have to stay on direct or indirect side. And I know a lot of people have this perception that if you do one, you can't necessarily do the other. Procurement is an entirely transferable skill set. I mean, the tools and the techniques that we have they all come from ultimately the same place. How you apply them, where you put the focus, whether it be more on stakeholder engagement and business partnering on indirect categories, more on supplier relationship management for direct categories, as an example. You just need to think about how you use those tools and techniques. But I would always encourage people to try both sides.
How would you characterize the difference between the two? I mean, you said marketing can feel a bit dysfunctional perhaps when you walk into it. Is there a particular approach that works better when you're talking to the sales and marketing side of the business versus the engineering or the API side?
Yeah, so one of the elements I just alluded to in terms of where you focus your time and effort. So within marketing procurement, I spent much more of my time working with my internal stakeholder group. Much more time really deeply understanding what it is that they wanted to achieve, because typically it's not saving money, which on the direct side, obviously where we're trying to limit and reduce cost of goods, it's much more in focus. But from a marketing perspective, this is about getting, as much as you possibly can from the available budget that you have. It's about producing, the best, most famous creative content that you can, that potentially is going to win awards, and making sure that you can get that content and those messages to the right people at the right time to influence their purchase decisions. So having to think a bit more about how the marketeers are motivated, understanding what their objectives are, and doing whatever you can to align behind that really, really helps you.
It's hard to put a number on creativity, isn't it? How do you attempt to budget or try and come up with some ROI around creative?
As you said, it's difficult to put a price on creativity. I've been told that many, many times in my career. For me, it's taking a finite amount of money, because the budget will essentially be set, and getting the best possible work for that. There are different ways that you can measure that, whether it's econometrics or looking at the quality of the creative based on focus groups and feedback. So you can have a quantitative assessment of how good creative is, and it just becomes a case of how much are you willing to pay for the results that it will deliver. So more and more now, and certainly as we do more programmatic advertising and personalized media campaigns, you can see the return that you get based on the investment and based on the quality of the creative that you're serving up. So it's only going to become more and more prevalent, I'm sure of it.
Yeah. The last few years, I think for everyone working in pharma, have been pretty tough. It's been a very bumpy road. What's it been like for you? I mean, what's your experience been since COVID started to fade, and then the global uncertainty, inflation that's followed? What's your experience been of that?
So it's been quite rough. We've not been spared the challenges that I know many other organizations have suffered. I mean, I rejoined the direct materials and the current role I'm in the summer of 2021, which was in many ways either the best or the worst possible time to come back into this part of the organization, because inflation has been rampant. And there's been many contributing factors to that, whether it's energy, wage costs, the demand boom as we've come out of COVID, and supply chain disruptions that we've seen in China and other places. So I think the most important things for me, and some of the principles that we've looked to apply, and going all the way back to how I learnt to build these relationships with our key supplier partners, is we treat people fairly. And I think this is really key. And nobody likes accepting a price increase. And we certainly will push back on excessive requests for price increases. But we have to be sympathetic, and we have to support not only a sustainable business for Bayer, but a sustainable business for our suppliers. And I feel we've done that really well over the
Mhm.
last couple of years. And of course, in return, what we ask is, as things start to normalize, that we have the opportunity to come back and say, well, now the trend is going in the other direction, and that's a lot of the work that my team is engaged in at the moment. Is
Mm.
how we make sure 2024 and beyond is a little more normal. I'm not sure it will ever be
Yeah.
exactly as it was before,
Mm.
but a bit of more normalization.
What kind of strategies have you put in place to manage the cost increases and then hopefully starting to drop again in the year ahead?
There's lots of things that we always had as good ideas, but we were never able to implement in the past. So, for
Mm.
example, we have talked about having 5,000 suppliers. We don't need 5,000 suppliers.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anything that we can do to streamline and simplify the supply base makes everybody's life easier in terms of managing it internally. But also it means that we can consolidate more of our spend and activity with fewer suppliers, which means, they will also win through this process. What we buy is also sometimes unnecessarily complicated.
Mhm.
There's many things that we buy which are unique to us.
Mhm.
So the complexity is another area where we can address and we can standardize, because of course that makes us more resilient, because it gives
Mhm.
us
Mhm.
more options in the market as well. So those are just a couple of the levers that we're
Yep.
looking to accelerate on.
I suppose that makes it easier to switch suppliers as well if you've got a more
Yeah.
of a standard offering.
Yeah, depending on the extent of the regulations, yes, it gives us more freedom and more resilience.
Let's talk then about cash flow, because your new CEO, Bill Anderson, he's made some very, very public statements about the cash flow situation at Bayer, saying that a company that has nearly 50 billion euros in revenue but zero cash flow is simply not acceptable. Now, that's all public knowledge.
Yeah.
How's that filtered down to you and to the strategies you're putting in place to manage cash flow?
Yes, it's based on that, and obviously we issued a profit warning at the end of July this year, where we reduced our cash flow forecast from 3 billion euros down to zero.
Mm.
So as you can imagine, obviously that created an impact externally, but internally it really doubled down our efforts on really the three main things and three main areas where we need to focus on improving the cash flow cycle.
Mhm.
One, obviously, we have the one which is directly linked to procurement around accounts payable. So in terms of optimizing payment terms, something I know, many of my colleagues across the industry have worked hard on for many years.
Mm.
At the other end, working on accounts receivable, so the speed with which we are receiving the money from our customers, and then in the middle, the inventory that we're holding
Mm.
internally. So we are leading the initiative, and I'm leading an initiative across Bayer for accounts payable as we look to capitalize on longer payment terms wherever we possibly can. And also we're involved in some inventory initiatives as well. So when it's things like consignment stock holding and different tools that we can use to
Yeah.
help us with that. So yeah, we're very much focused on that.
Is there a role for technology across those three different areas? I mean, there's lots of procure tech companies out there which would say that they can solve or at least assist in those three different areas. Is that something you're looking at, or do you feel as though you've already got enough tech for the time being? Thank you very much.
A few different questions in there. So yep, we have plenty of tech, but we don't have solutions to all of our challenges.
Mm.
So I would always be open to discussing new opportunities to explore tech to help us to solve some of those challenges. We're not currently looking at tech specific to this. I think the only one I would probably say is we're using a platform to support our supply chain finance program, and I think that is an innovation for Bayer for sure.
Yep. You call these the three C's, don't you? Cost inflation, cash flow, and CO2.
Yep, these are kind of not the full exhaustive list of priorities for sure, but these are probably the three biggest that we will focus on in 2024 and beyond. So yeah, the elements of cost that we talked about. So how do we optimize the cost of goods, cash improvement, and then also what do we do to help to decarbonize?
Yeah.
And really, as it relates to procurement, with a specific focus on scope 3.
Mhm.
As an organization, I think we've made great progress on scope 1 and scope 2 already. And obviously procurement are involved in scope 2 in terms of sourcing the green electricity and
Mhm.
green energy. But scope 3, and I know this is a common challenge across the industry as well, we still have work to do in terms of measurement and reporting, and just making sure that we're engaged with the right suppliers and moving in the right direction.
It's usually the biggest by a long way, isn't it? Scope 3. Do you have a sense of how much of your emissions fall into scope 3?
Yeah, I mean, it varies by division. As I'm sure you know, Bayer has 3 different businesses in agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and consumer health. I'm obviously associated with consumer health, and I know here it's the vast majority is scope 3, because
Mhm.
the nature of the manufacturing operations that we have are really just secondary manufacturing operations, so formulation and packaging activities. So I believe it's probably 10-20% only is scope 1 and 2, and the balance is all scope 3.
A huge amount in there.
Yeah.
How do you work with suppliers on that mission? I mean, so much of the responsibility is going to ultimately fall on them. How are you collaborating with your network of suppliers to try and hit those targets?
So a few different things. I mean, the main approach is actually working through a specialist group that we have. So we have a scope 3 accelerator team.
Okay.
So they sit within our central governance and enabling procurement team. And they are working to engage with the top suppliers. So I think for consumer health, we're talking about maybe 30 or 40 suppliers out of the total number. These are the ones that are contributing the largest carbon footprint, and really understanding, so what are you already doing? So what do you already have in place? Because in some cases, we're also learning from the suppliers, and in some cases they are more mature and more sophisticated than some of the things that we're doing. So we can learn, and equally they can learn from us. So it's really strengthening those relationships as part of the supplier relationship management program. So this works hand in hand with our SRM program as well.
Those 3 areas we've been talking about there, so cost, cash flow, and decarbonisation. How do you balance those 3 priorities? Is there a perfect formula for it? How are you thinking about it?
So not perfect. And it ultimately, I mean, it comes down to a trade-off decision and a trade-off discussion. And I think that what we do and what we try and focus on is giving all of the teams all the information they need to make the best informed decision for their category, their supplier, their RFP or sourcing activity as best they can. If they need help and support, then of course they can escalate that. But we try wherever possible to get all 3.
Are you able to track all 3 together? I mean, is there a reporting mechanism where you can sort of see them, score them across the 3 criteria?
Yes, for cost and cash, absolutely. For carbon, it's still work in progress.
Yeah. We're at the start of 2024. What are your New Year's resolutions? What are the main strategic priorities for you for the year ahead?
So, I mean, I think we talked about the elements around the objectives, so how we can support Bayer as an organization. I think probably the biggest resolution for me as we go into 2024 is more around the people. So here, if you like, you have the 4th C, which is around the community that support and help to deliver this work. We know, and if you read any newspaper at the moment, you can probably find out quite a lot about some of the challenges that we face at Bayer at the moment. Bill Anderson has been clear about some of the potentially difficult decisions that will need to be taken in 2024 about the future of the company. My main resolution is retaining optimism and positivity about what the future will look like, and helping to lead and support the team through any changes that will come next year, whatever they will be, because there's some uncertainty ahead of us.
Not just for Bayer, of course, for so many people. It's going to be an interesting year of rebalancing.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time today, Malik. Really appreciate it. Fascinating insights.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks again to Malik for sharing those insights. He'll be speaking at an upcoming PharmaSource event, which we'll be announcing very soon. So make sure you don't miss out by registering at pharmasource.global so you receive our newsletter, exclusive resources, and invitations to events. Thank you for listening.